The abstract of this story begins with a question that makes the blood run cold. What drives people to board a ferry in the face of an approaching storm? And what decisions can cost hundreds of lives? And if you want to understand one of the most tragic maritime events of the early 2000s, stay until the end, because the story of MV Princess of the Stars is a lesson about pride, error, and the price ordinary people pay. On the evening of 21st June 2008, the passenger ferry Princess of the Stars, operating on an inter-island route in the Philippines, ran into Typhoon Fengshen and became the center of one of the largest modern maritime disasters in the region. The ship, large and designed to carry hundreds of passengers and cargo, encountered storm conditions. The wind and rain increased so sharply that the sea turned into a destructive force that literally washed away. Hopes of rescue don't go away. The details matter here because they explain why. The tragedy went far beyond an ordinary accident. According to official figures, 814 people died as a result of the sinking and subsequent events, while the number of victims and survivors was much smaller. These figures are not just statistics on a chart, they are mothers and fathers, children, workers and tourists whose lives ended in one night and whose names now come up in conversations about maritime safety. Why did this happen? The answer is not simple. Reports and coverage point to several factors, each of which compounded the situation. It began with navigational errors and the decision to sail despite clearly deteriorating weather, accompanied by possible overloading and insufficient preparedness for evacuation, followed by technical problems, panic on board, and a delayed start of search and rescue operations because the storm prevented ships and aircraft from approaching the disaster site. Picture the scene: darkness, torrential rain, the roar of waves, people trying to reach the deck, heavy doors and corridors that become traps when the vessel heels. These are the last minutes described by survivors, and their memories are not for the faint of heart. Such details proved decisive. Many passengers remained in their cabins, some were disoriented and could not get out, and when the ship began to list, minutes cost lives for those who did not make it. The rescue operation that followed was arduous and lasted several days. The Coast Guard, the military, and local volunteers deployed helicopters, patrol vessels, and every available resource, but nature and the bad weather made the task almost impossible. Bodies and wreckage were found over several days and weeks, and every recovered item became the final proof of someone's existence, every diary or photograph a window into a life that can never be returned. After the tragedy, investigations, court hearings, and public debates followed about the safety of ferry transport in the Philippines. Accusations were directed at the captain and the shipping company. The responsibility of government services that should have warned and prohibited sailing in such conditions was discussed, as were issues of passenger registration standards and cargo accounting. Many experts stressed that a combination of human factors, the desire not to delay a voyage, economic pressure, and a low culture of safety proved fatal. But within this tragedy, there are also finer, human strokes that force us to view the event not only as a problem of rules and protocols, stories of brave acts when crew and some passengers tried to help others, sometimes at the cost of their own lives, stories of local fishermen and volunteers who first came to assist, risking themselves, and stories of families who still seek answers and justice for their loved ones. For the viewer and the reader, all of this is not just material for a segment, but a reminder of the fragility of life and how quickly routine can turn into catastrophe. The aftermath prompted measures to strengthen oversight of ferry operations, changes in passenger accounting procedures, and requirements for crew evacuation training. But these reforms come after the losses, not before them, and that premise fuels public outrage. Why must the price of the lesson be human lives? Another important aspect is the psychological legacy. Survivors often suffered post-traumatic consequences. Many families endured long legal battles for compensation and recognition of responsibility. A photograph taken on deck, a name on the missing list, all this remains in the memory of communities and has sparked waves of public anger and the demand to improve shipping rules. If you are creating a video or documentary, there are several hooks you should use. Start with a personal story, one name, one photograph that will humanize the viewer. Continue with a description of the storm and the decisions that led to the tragedy. And pose the question of whether those lives could have been saved if someone had made a different choice. End the story with the consequences and the lessons, because they give the viewer not only drama but meaning. Finally, one cannot ignore the cultural effect. Dramatic footage and reports about the Princess of the Stars showed the world that maritime safety is not an abstract issue, but a matter of life and death, and that in some regions, standards of transport require systemic change so that past mistakes are not repeated. The memory of the dead is preserved through memorials, documentaries, and the names spoken at remembrance events, and that matters, so grief is not forgotten and lessons are learned. If you plan to use this material for a video, use emotional inserts, storm footage, interviews with survivors, archival shots of search and rescue operations, and short facts about the changes that followed the tragedy. But above all, do not make a show of other people's pain, give voice to the affected, and respect the memory of the deceased. This story is not only about a ferry and a typhoon, it is about human choice and its consequences, about how one night can change the lives of hundreds and whole communities, and it is material that demands reflection and discussion. Think about that before you close the video, and remember the names of those the sea took, because memory is the only thing that remains after water and wind. On September 20th, 2018, Lake Victoria became the scene of one of the most tragic maritime disasters in modern Tanzanian history. The ferry Nyerere, a working passenger vessel that daily carried people and goods between shores, capsized during a maneuver while overcrowded, and the consequences of that single night forever changed the fates of hundreds of families. Don't go away, this is not just a dry report of facts. It is a story about how an entire world of people stood on the edge between a routine, trip, and catastrophe. How one mistake, one sharp turn, and overload resulted in the disappearance of 228 lives according to investigations and counts, and why this case became a painful reminder of the price societies pay for weak safety systems. That day, the ferry, rated for a certain capacity, took on board far more people than it should have, and among the passengers were local traders with goods, school children, and families rushing about their business. Witnesses later recounted that the decks were packed, people stood shoulder to shoulder, and vehicles and cargo were stowed in such a way that the vessel's center of gravity became shifted, and when the captain made a sharp turn at the pier, the ferry lost stability and began to capsize. Survivors described moments of panic, screams, and helplessness as water poured in so quickly that many did not have time to find life jackets or reach the narrow exits. The rescue effort, involving the Coast Guard, military, and local fishermen, was long and arduous. Stormy conditions and cold water hampered searches, and the recovered bodies and wreckage became bitter confirmation of the scale of the disaster. Local communities searched through the night and for many days until the lists of the dead began to fill with names, while families of the missing received no answers that could console their loss. Investigations revealed a chain of errors and systemic problems: overload, poor passenger accounting, weak regulatory oversight, and economic pressure on vessel owners for whom regular crossings are a source of income, so risks were often ignored. There were also accusations of inadequate crew training for emergencies and the absence of an effective evacuation system, factors that together turn an ordinary voyage into a potential catastrophe. But if we stop at numbers and bureaucratic conclusions, we miss the most important thing: the human stories that make the tragedy real. Husbands who never returned, mothers who lost children, young people with plans for the future, traders who lost their goods and livelihoods, and entire villages where lists of the missing replaced daily life. In reports and interviews, you hear voices repeating the same names, photographs and candles lit on the shore, details that cut deeper than dry lines of official documents. Special attention falls on the role of local fishermen and volunteers. In the first hours after the wreck, it was they who, risking their own boats, first came to help, pulled survivors from the water, and recovered bodies, and their courage and selflessness became one of the most touching aspects of the story. These accounts of aid and neighborly solidarity remain in the community's memory long after the official procedures. The process of legal proceedings and public reckoning was painful. Public anger demanded accountability and change. Relatives of the dead sought compensation, and journalistic investigations raised questions about why repeated safety warnings were not heeded. As a result of the disaster reforms began, passenger counting rules were tightened, stricter requirements were imposed on shipping companies regarding vessel inspections and crew training for emergency evacuations, and regulators stepped up efforts to prevent overloading and to ensure enough life-saving equipment was available. Yet change does not come overnight, and many families who lost loved ones say no reform can bring back those taken by the water. Psychological consequences, trauma, and the inability to come to terms with loss. All this becomes a long process that accompanies communities for years, sometimes generations. If you are preparing material or want to convey the full picture to viewers, remember to balance facts with human stories. Audiences grasp the scale of tragedy better when they see faces, hear names, and read diaries, because through individual fates, a catastrophe stops being abstract. It is also worth explaining the technical aspects, how overloading and a shifted center of gravity affect a vessel's stability, why regulators' directives matter, and which specific measures were proposed after the disaster to reduce the risk of recurrence. This will add not only drama but educational value to your piece, helping the audience understand what can be changed and how to prevent similar events in the future. Finally, the moral of this story is clear. It is about the fragility of systems and how human negligence or economic pressure can turn into catastrophe multiplied thousands of times. Rules exist not for bureaucracy, but to save lives, and respecting them is the duty of everyone involved, from passengers to captains and officials. In closing, note that the memory of the Nyerere victims lives on in communities and records. Each year names are spoken at memorial events, and the lessons of this disaster still serve as a warning for those responsible for transport on Lake Victoria and in other parts of the world. The Nyerere story is not just a tally of numbers, it is a call for constant attention to safety, responsibility, and the principle that human life must come before profit and convenience, because losses that occur in one night leave scars for decades and teach us to value precautions today to prevent sorrow tomorrow. Don't switch off. This is not just another shipwreck story. It's an account of how a luxury floating city turned into an upturned carcass on a rocky shore, and how human error became a tragedy remembered by millions. On January 13, 2012, the cruise ship Costa Concordia was sailing along the Tuscan coast and suddenly became the center of an international scandal and investigation, because what began as a routine route full of evening shows, dinners, and smiling faces ended in panic and fear at sea. Imagine a quiet night, music, lights, and illumination on the decks, laughter, and then a sudden violent impact, the grinding of metal, the shudder, and a vessel that seemed unsinkable beginning to list. Have you ever heard the sound of screams in a metal corridor where doors slam shut and stairways become icy traps? Those were the sounds people on the Costa Concordia heard, and they are forever imprinted, and the memories of survivors don't go away. These details matter because they show how small decisions and human arrogance can change destinies. The captain, who later became the focus of accusations, decided to execute a risky maneuver to sail close to shore to wave at and perform for locals, and that maneuver led to a collision with a submerged reef. The consequences were swift and merciless. Water rushed into the hull, electricity and navigation failed, and the flow of information at first was fragmentary and contradictory. Many passengers described chaos on the decks when they faced the choice of either jumping into cold water or awaiting unclear instructions. Lowering lifeboats was hampered by the list and instant disorientation, and some people, tragically, never found their way out. The toll of the disaster was painfully concrete. 32 people died, their names now invoked in memorial services and material monuments, and their families live with an irretrievable loss. If you watched footage from the scene, you remember a carpet of life jackets, lights, and long shadows on the water. Those images circled the globe and raised questions about how the modern tourism industry could allow such breaches of basic safety rules. After the incident, a massive investigation began. Crew decisions were scrutinized, the proportionality of the response, evacuation readiness, and the actions of the Coast Guard. Public opinion and investigators soon descended on the captain and company executives, leading to trials and charges of negligence and even criminal conduct because society demanded someone who could explain why so many people were put in mortal danger aboard a luxury vessel. But behind dry testimony lay human stories of heroism and failures. There were accounts of crew members who risked their lives helping cabin neighbors, of passengers who organized improvised rescue teams, and of those who stayed on board because they could not escape. Such stories add depth and force us to reflect. Heroes and victims often shared the same deck, their fates intertwined in the instant of catastrophe. Another hook worth noting: the subsequent salvage and dismantling of the hull became an engineering phenomenon, unique and unprecedented in scale. Months and years were spent carefully stabilizing, righting, and removing the giant from the site because leaving the decaying titan by the shore was unacceptable both ecologically and morally. It was not only a technical operation, but also an act of symbolic closure, an attempt to remove the visible trace of the disaster and return the tourist haven to normal. In public discourse, the Costa Concordia became a turning point for reform. Requirements for crew training, passenger accounting procedures, and evacuation protocols at sea were strengthened. Many cruise lines reviewed their standards, and passengers began to pay more attention to safety, because advertising images and reality on the water did not always coincide. But most important are the people, relatives of the dead, survivors and witnesses. Their voices set the tone of the whole narrative. Many of them suffered severe shock and post-traumatic symptoms after the tragedy, and their path to recovery takes years because it is impossible to forget how one night turned a holiday into a catastrophe. If you are making a video or an in-depth report, use hooks. Start with a personal story of one person, follow with the collision scene, then shift to consequences, court battles, and the engineering of the salvage. Such a narrative will hold attention and provide emotional depth. Also pose questions to the viewer. Was the captain's also cested, spectacular approach worth it? What control mechanisms might have prevented the disaster? And what should society take away from this pain? Don't forget ethics. Costa Concordia material can easily be turned into sensationalism, but these are real people's stories and must be treated respectfully, giving voice to the affected and honoring the memory of the dead. Memorials and documentaries that emerged after the event keep the memory alive and serve as warnings. Safety matters more than ratings and spectacle. And finally, consider one simple truth. The line between celebration and catastrophe is thin. One ill-considered decision, one risky approach to shore, and everything can change forever. Costa Concordia teaches us to respect rules, value human life, and remember those who did not return, because their names will remain a permanent part of the sea's history and the lessons we must learn to prevent repetition. When we talk about shipwrecks, we recall not just ruined vessels, but whole human destinies swallowed by the waves. Each of the three cases covered in this video is not merely a story of metal, machinery, and storms. It is a chronicle of human error, the power of nature, and a fate that spares no one. These ships are symbols of an era. Their loss left a mark not only on the oceans, but on the heart of humanity. Behind every number stands a life, dreams, fear, and hope. The people who set out believed that return was only a matter of time, but the sea decided otherwise. The sea is always exacting. It forgives no arrogance and shows no mercy to those who underestimate its power. There is no malice in it, only the indifference of the elements before which a person remains, but a tiny point on a boundless surface. Each of these disasters became a lesson. For engineers to build more durable hulls, for navigators to watch forecasts more carefully, for captains to remember that the sea always has the final word. Despite advance in technology, satellite systems, and automatic beacons, even today humans are not omnipotent before the elements. It is striking how, decades and even centuries on, we still feel the pain of these tragedies because there is something eternal in them. When enormous ships, created by the genius and labor of thousands, sink within minutes, we are faced with the truth. Nature is stronger than we are. These shipwrecks are a reminder of the limits of human pride and the fragility of life. Many of those aboard fought for life until the very end, helping others, clinging to wreckage, believing that rescue would come. Their courage and self-sacrifice have become part of our shared human story. On the seabed lie not just vessels, but memory of bravery, of fear, of the last look into the abyss. And perhaps that is why these stories continue to move us. After all, in each of us there lives both a fear of the unknown and an admiration for those who dared to face it. The next time you hear the sound of the waves or look out at the horizon, remember somewhere out there, beneath the water, lie traces of greatness and tragedy, ships that have become monuments to humanity's urge to conquer the ocean. The sea keeps their secrets, and we keep their memory. Let these stories serve as a reminder of the price of courage and of how important it is to respect the forces of nature. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which shipwrecks do you think were the most tragic in history? Your interest and attention help keep alive the memory of those who were taken by the sea. Thank you for being with us. And remember, even in the darkest waters, history leaves a light.